Free your mind from idle thoughts. And for you, every season is a good season, or every day is a good day. And idle thoughts mean illusory thoughts, thoughts of pursuing a future, thoughts of making one's happiness depend on something which isn't here at all.
Want to suggest a truth so profoundly simple it has been missed by an entire civilization? The reason you are miserable is because you are trying too hard to be happy. You are engaged in a catastrophic, lifelong pursuit, chasing a phantom known as happiness. And the very act of chasing, the very effort of striving, ensures that it perpetually remains out of reach. This is what I call the law of reversed effort, or as the ancient Zen masters knew it, the backwards law. Think of it. If you strain and force yourself to fall asleep, you become intensely, painfully awake. The attempt to relax becomes a tension. If you desperately try to sink, you float. And if you desperately try to be happy, all you feel is the strain of that desperation. The harder you work to secure your joy, the more you confirm your present state of dissatisfaction. Why does this happen? Because we have culturally manufactured the notion of a separate I, an internal captain of the ship, whose sole purpose is to command the unruly processes of life, body, and emotion toward a future goal called happiness. But this I you think you are is simply a function of the whole process. When you say, I must control my feelings to be happy, you have separated the doer from the doing, and that internal friction, that attempt of the self to grasp the self, is the very root of your anxiety. You are treating the present moment as a mere inconvenience, a tiresome passage you must rush through to get to some reward in the future. We save money not to enjoy it, but to secure a future free of worry. We climb the ladder not for the joy of climbing, but for the illusory state of security at the top. But the future is an abstraction. It is an empty promise. You will never catch up with yourself because the moment you arrive, that future is now the present, and you will immediately begin treating it as another passage to another promised future. It is a self-defeating treadmill. This brings us to the core dilemma, the most important question we must face if we are to escape this trap. If the determined pursuit of happiness is the very mechanism destroying our sense of peace, how then does one live a life of profound content and meaning without striving, without forcing, and without chasing the illusion of permanence? The simple answer, and the most difficult to accept, lies in the wisdom of insecurity. Security is a fantasy. Everything you value, your health, your wealth, your relationships, your very life, is flowing, changing, and absolutely impermanent. To demand that the universe stop its flow and stabilize for your comfort is a profound misunderstanding of the cosmic dance. It is only the rigid, dead wood that snaps in the gale. The living branch bends and thus survives. When you invest all your emotional capital in trying to make the unchangeable fact of change stop, you create a psychological tension that guarantees suffering. True liberation, the very thing you seek, is found not in securing the feeling of happiness, but in the radical and absolute acceptance of life's inherent insecurity. The moment you stop fighting the present moment, when you drop the desperate need to change it, you discover a profound, effortless contentment that the pursuer could never find. You must be willing to let the wave collapse. You must be willing to let the tide go out. Let us turn our gaze inward now towards the architect of this misery, the ego. we touched upon the internal friction created by the separate I. The problem is rooted in our deeply held conviction that we are a soul trapped inside a machine, a conscious driver attempting to navigate a body that is fundamentally other than ourselves. This feeling of being a stranger in the universe, an isolated awareness looking out through the eyes, is the great underlying taboo of our culture. We are afraid to admit that we are, in fact, not separate at all. This false sense of separation gives rise to the tyranny of the mind. The mind, the great intellectual function, is an absolutely magnificent tool, a glorious instrument for counting, measuring, naming, and predicting. It is an excellent servant, but it is a perfectly dreadful master. What does the mind do when it is in charge? It tries to grasp reality through its own limited mechanism, language. Language is a map. It is the brilliant human trick of taking the flowing, continuous, complex reality of the world and chopping it up into neat, discrete, nameable segments. We say river, and we separate it from bank. But where does one truly end and the other begin? They are inseparable. We say self, and we separate it from world. But you are simply the whole world flowing here. When we use language, we try to capture the universe in a net of words. And because the mind can only deal with these discrete, chopped-up items, the names, the symbols, the categories, it struggles relentlessly to find the continuous, flowing happiness that it has also conceptually separated from sadness. The word happiness is a symbol, a pointer. The mind, being a good map reader, tries to find the thing corresponding to the word. But happiness is not a thing you can grab. It is the fluid state of being, a consequence of your involvement with the flow, not a destination on the map. Because we have a word for it, we assume it exists as a permanent, solid entity. And because we have a word for unhappiness, the mind starts a war. I must eradicate this name thing, unhappiness, and grasp that name thing, happiness. But this is like trying to lift yourself up by your own bootstraps. The controller is what is being controlled. The seeker is what is being sought. The attempt to control the mind with the mind is an infinite regression, and it is exhausting. You are trying to use a map to change the territory, and the map simply does not have the power to do that. You are confusing the finger pointing at the moon with the moon itself. And you are so busy examining the finger, your own thoughts, your own striving, your own ego, that you miss the lunar brilliance entirely. To truly live, to truly find contentment, we must temporarily dethrone the mind as the master. We must learn to trust the process of the universe, the intelligence within the body that breathes you without your permission, that beats your heart without conscious effort, and that flows you into existence as a manifestation of the cosmos. The fundamental shift, then, is not to do something different, but to realize something different, that the doer is the doing. And when the mind ceases its frantic striving to solve the problem of its own existence, it falls silent. And in that silence, the constant background music of the universe, the reality of this moment, finally becomes audible. This is where we find the profound contentment that transcends the futile pursuit of the symbol called happiness. We have established that the pursuit of happiness is a futile, circular chase, driven by the ego's desperate need for security and the mind's misunderstanding of language. Now, let us consider the vital necessity of what you are trying so desperately to avoid: suffering. We are trapped by our desire for one side of the coin only. We want the light without the darkness, the pleasure without the pain, the happiness without the sorrow. But the Tao, the great way of the universe, teaches us that opposites are not antagonists. They are simply poles of the same energy. They are inseparable, like the front and back of your hand. Could you truly know what up is without having down to contrast it? Could the joy of light exist if you had never experienced darkness? To abolish the negative side of the experience, the anxiety, the fear, the sadness, is to abolish the positive side as well. If you erase the contrast, the picture disappears. This is the great, terrifying realization that forms the climax of our thinking. Life is a vibration. It is the rhythmic fluctuation between what you define as good and what you define as bad. The attempt to hold the vibration still on the peak of happiness is the act of stopping the music. It is a form of paralysis. When you truly understand this principle, your relationship with pain transforms. You stop treating suffering as an insult, a mistake, or a signal that you have failed in your pursuit of happiness. Instead, you begin to see it as an essential half of the whole. Consider the rhythm of breathing. The in-breath is full, a grasp, a gathering. The out-breath is empty, a release, a surrender. If you tried to have only the in-breath, to hold and possess the air forever, you would die in a spasm of suffocation. Life demands the release. Life demands the out-breath. The happy moments of your life are the in-breath. The moments of sorrow, loss, and frustration are the out-breath. The man who tries to cling to the good only, the happy state, is the man who insists on perpetual inhalation. He will become rigid, tense, and spiritually choked. The courage we need is not the courage to fight the dark, but the courage to dance with it. It is the willingness to let go when the tide demands the ebb, knowing that the flow will inevitably return. It is the realization that the moment is not a static point to be evaluated as good or bad, but a process to be experienced. When you abandon the goal of permanence, you discover a tremendous sense of freedom. There is no longer a necessity to always win, to always be right, or to always be on top. You can embrace the spontaneous flow of life, which means being willing to be the fool, the failure, the awkward one, the sad one. Paradoxically, by accepting the possibility of profound sadness, you open yourself fully to the possibility of profound joy. You cease to be a selective perceiver, trying to filter out half of reality, and become instead a full participator. This willingness to participate without reservation or defensiveness is the awakening. It is the profound, quiet realization that you are not being punished by the universe. You are the universe experiencing itself in a marvelous, rhythmic, oscillating dance of pleasure and pain, light and shadow. The chase ends here, not with the acquisition of happiness, but with the full realization of the perfection of the whole experience. We arrive now at the conclusion, not of an argument, but of a realization. We began by observing that the relentless effort to secure happiness is the very mechanism of our ruin. We learned that this pursuit is founded on the illusion of the separate ego, armed with a powerful yet limited linguistic mind, seeking to arrest the continuous flow of the universe. The great lesson, the profound, quiet learning that the wisdom traditions offer is this: you do not attain happiness. You simply cease to resist the life you already have. What, then, is the practical application of this wisdom? It is not about becoming passive or indifferent. It is about understanding the nature of effortless effort, or wu wei, as the Taoists call it. It is action taken without internal straining, without the ego attempting to impose its will upon the world, but rather moving in accordance with the world's natural current. Imagine rowing a small boat. If you fight the river, you exhaust yourself and capsize. If you trust the river, you use the least amount of effort to steer your boat while the current carries you forward. Wu Wei is not about doing nothing. It is about forcing nothing. Your life is the river. Your true joy emerges when you stop attempting to build dams against the flow, dams of rigid expectations, dams of permanent security, and dams against sorrow. When the moment calls for action, you act fully. When the moment calls for rest, you rest fully. When the moment calls for sorrow, you grieve fully. The fear of feeling pain is a far greater pain than the pain itself. The resistance to sorrow consumes more energy than the sorrow itself. When you realize that you are the flow, the totality of the ebb and the flood, you stop being afraid of the shadows, for you know they define the light. The message of reflection, the great learning, is therefore one of trust. Trust the process. Trust your own body, which knows how to heal itself, breathe itself, and live itself, far better than your anxious, striving mind does. Trust the universe, which is not a mechanism separate from you, but a whole that you are expressing. You are not an error. You are not a mistake that needs fixing by self-improvement books or endless therapy focused solely on fixing the problem. You are exactly what the universe intended to do in this time and place. And in accepting this, in fully and unconditionally welcoming this moment and the next, without demanding a change in the script, you find that contentment was not a destination, but the path itself. The pursuit ends when the realization begins. The ruin ceases when the striving stops. You are already happy in the deeper sense of being complete, whole, and perfectly aligned with the universe. You simply didn't notice it because you were too busy running away from it. Now, if this realization, if this profound understanding of how your own effort betrays your peace has resonated with the quiet, underlying sense of truth within you, then you are a fellow traveler on this great, meandering path. There is much more to explore on the nature of time, identity, and the cosmic joke of existence. If you wish to continue receiving these inquiries into the true nature of reality and consciousness, I invite you to click the subscribe button below. Join us as we continue to investigate, without striving, the glorious, messy, and fundamentally perfect process of being alive.